Boom. Yep, that's right. It is another reading with a new book, everybody. This is what we're reading next here on the Jaybefaunt channel. So good to see all of you here today on this beautiful day. And right now, with a little tropical storm outside. So, just good to see all of you. The Jaybefaunt channel is available on all major podcast platforms like Anchor, Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. So you can subscribe to me there. I'm also part of the Revolutionary Blackout Network. So you can subscribe to the Revolutionary Blackout Network and catch me on the JB Show on 1 p.m. on Sundays, 1 p.m. Eastern. You can catch me on RBN Live on Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern, and on the Savvy and JB Show on Thursdays at 6. If like the stream, please make sure to give us a like. Also, just to let you guys know, I am very grateful to all the patrons on Patreon as well as Coffee, for without you guys, I would not have a channel. And, we just finished the reading of Blood in My Eye by George Jackson, right? And that was a deep dive into revolutionary thinking as well as revolutionary tactics and processes. That is exclusively, well, almost completely exclusively on Rockfin. I did do a reading on YouTube, a live reading, because number one, it was a deep subject that I wanted to really put out there more. But at the same time, I also did it because it's more to whet the appetite of the people who are not on Rockfin to come over to Rockfin, and also look at, some of the content on there as well. Because unfortunately, because of the way certain platforms, that the way they operate, there are certain things that can or can't be said or may be flagged, or sometimes it may be a little too spicy for YouTube. So, with that being said, this is one of the reasons why Blood in My Eye is basically exclusively on Rockfin, or almost exclusively on Rockfin, except for one part. So that's why. And so that gave me a basis of understanding. So now I can get into what, Sister Assata Shakur has said in her book, in her autobiography. Now, um, I don't want to spend too much time in the intro. I really want to get into this book. The official title is Assata, an Autobiography. Forwards by Angela Davis and Lennox S. Hines. So this is going to be, I'm going to be reading the forwards by Angela Davis and Lennox Hines, and then we will get into chapter 1. So yeah, so I just wanted to get into this. I am extremely excited to get into this. I already read it already, but this is deep. And in the forwards is actually going to go over, basically what happened to Assata and why she ended up in the situation that she is. How did she end up as an exile in Cuba? Right? So we're going to get into it. There's a historical analysis of what happened to her. And I'd like to get into that. So this is deep. I got my tea. Tea, 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 tea. This is so good. And we're ready to go. So this is the forward. This forward starts with Angela Davis. Let's get into it, everybody. In the 1970s, as Assata Shakur awaited trial on charges of being an accomplice to murder, I participated in a benefit at Rutgers University in New Brunswick, New Jersey, to raise funds for her legal defense. At the time, Assata was being held nearby in the Middlesex County Correctional Facility for Men. Lennox Hines, a member of the Rutgers faculty, had invited me to be one of the featured speakers at that benefit. Lennox was a leader of the National Conference of Black Lawyers and represented Assata in a federal lawsuit contesting the appeal conditions of her confinement in a New Jersey prison. He had previously worked on my case, and we had both served in leadership of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression since its founding in 1973. Attending the benefit event were Rutgers faculty members, a sizable number of Black professionals, and local activists who were the mainstay of numerous campaigns to free the political prisoners of that era. It was an upbeat event, imbued with the optimism of the times. My own recent acquittal on charges of murder, kidnapping, conspiracy stood as a dramatic example of how we could successfully challenge the government's offenses against radical anti-racist movements. However, the powerful forces arrayed against Assata, the FBI's counterintelligence program, and the New York and New Jersey police organizations, no one could have persuaded us that we were not capable of building a triumphant movement for Assata's freedom. This benefit was one small step in that direction, and as we left the event, we were quite satisfied with the $3,000 we raised that afternoon. By then, the very radical activists had learned to assume that our public meetings were subject to routine police and or FBI surveillance. Yet we were entirely unprepared for what seemed like a reenactment of the 1973 events for which Assata faced charges of murder. Assata, Zaid Shakur, and Sundiata Akoli had been stopped on a New Jersey turnpike by state troopers who claimed they had a faulty taillight. The encounter left Assata critically wounded and two others, State Trooper Warner Foster and Assata's friend Zaid Shakur, dead. As a group of us left the benefit and drove down a county road towards Lennox Hines' house, we were having a small after party. We were quite startled when the local police signaled for our car to stop. My friend Charlene Mitchell, at the time, was the executive director of the Alliance and was told to step out of the car, along with the driver and other person riding with us. As policemen taunted us by clearly placing their hands on their holstered guns, I was instructed to remain in the otherwise empty automobile. Lennox, whose car had been following, immediately doubled back and approached the police with his attorney's identification card in hand, explaining that he was our lawyer. This caused the officers to become more visibly nervous, including the two who pulled a riot gun from the police car and proceeded to aim at Lennox from close range. All of us froze. We knew only too well that any innocent gesture could be construed as a reach for a weapon, and that this confrontation could easily become a recapitulation of the events that had left Assata with a murder charge. The spurious explanation given by police for the ambush was a warrant for my arrest, later proven false. Though they allowed us to leave, it was only shortly after we arrived at Lennox that we discovered that they had already called for reinforcements and literally surrounded the house. When one of the first Black woman judges in New Jersey and several other prominent community figures at the house, we were nonetheless compelled to call on higher power in the form of Congressman John Conyers in Washington. We figured a request from the for a federal escort out of the state of New Jersey might put some pressure on the local police. These were the kinds of measures and friends needed in such a volatile time. I relate this incident in detail because it might help readers of Assata's autobiography not only to focus on the political role of the police during the 1970s, but also to better understand important historical aspects of the routine racial profiling associated with current police practices. Such a historical perspective is especially important today with When brazen expressions of structural racism, such as the pattern of mass imprisonment of which communities of color are subjected, are rendered invisible by the prevailing moral panic over crime. And if this were not enough, we find that at the same time, such remedies as affirmative action programs and such safety nets as social welfare are being constantly disestablished. When Richard Nixon raised the slogan of law and order in the 1970s, it was used in part to discredit the Black liberation movement and to justify the deployment of police, courts, and prisons against key figures in this and other radical movements of that era. Today, the ironic coupling in declining crime rate today the ironic coupling of a declining crime rate and the consolidation of a prison industrial complex that makes increased rates of incarceration its economic necessity has facilitated the imprisonment of 2 million people in the United States. In this ideological context, political prisoners like Assata Shakur, Mumia Abu Jamal, and Leonard Peltier are represented in popular political discourse as criminals who deserve either to be executed or to spend the rest of their lives behind bars. During the late 1990s, the racist hysteria directed against Assata was resuscitated when the New Jersey State Police reputedly prevailed upon Pope John Paul II to the occasion of his first trip to Cuba as pressure for Fidel Castro to extradite Assata. As if this were not enough, the New Jersey governor, Christy Todd Whitman, offered a $50,000 reward, later doubled, for Assata's return, and Congress passed a bill calling on the government of Cuba to initiate extradition procedures. In an open letter to the Pope, Assata asks a question that should concern all of us. Quote, why, I wonder, do I warrant such attention? Why do I represent that is such a threat? I'm sorry, what do I represent that is such a threat? End quote. We would all do well to seriously ponder her questions. Why indeed was she constructed by the government and mass media as a consummate enemy in the 1970s, only to reemerge at the return of the century as a singular target for governors, Congress, and the Fraternal Order of Police? What has she been made to represent? What ideological work has this representation performed? In the 1970s, Assata Shakur's image was deployed on official FBI wanted posters and in the popular media as evidence of the terrorist motivations of the Black liberation movement. Black militants were assumed to be enemies of the state and were associated with communist challenges to capitalist democracy. The protracted search for Assata, during which she was demonized in ways that are now unimaginable, served further to justify the imprisonment of vast numbers of political activists, many of whom remain locked up today. By the way, a lot of them are still locked up, and it's 2022. 25 years later, at this time, the retailing of the image of Assata as an enemy is even more damaging, omitting the original political context and representing her as a common criminal, a bank robber, and a murderer. This lifting of her image out of the past for very contemporary purposes serves to justify the consolidation of a vast prison industrial complex, which Assata herself has described as, quote, not only a mechanism to convert public tax money into profits for private corporations, but also an essential element of modern neoliberal capitalism, end quote. In her view, this new formation serves two purposes. Quote, one, to neutralize and contain huge segments of potentially rebellious sectors of the population, and two, to sustain a system of super exploitation where many Black and Latino captives are imprisoned in white rural overseer communities, end quote. As the above quotation reveals, Assata remains very much engaged with contemporary radical politics specific to the United States, even though she has been unable to visit this country since her escape from prison and her decision to settle in Cuba many years ago. As you read her extraordinary autobiography, you will discover a woman who has nothing in common with the hostile representations that refuse to expire. I urge you to reflect on what it must mean for her to have been unable to attend her mother's funeral or to visit with her new grandchild. As you follow her life story, you discover a compassionate human being with an unswerving commitment to justice that travels easily across racial and ethnic lines, in and out of prison and across oceans and time. She speaks to all of us, and especially to those of us who are sequestered in a growing global network of prisons and jails. At a time when optimism has receded from our political vocabulary, she offers invaluable gifts, inspiration, and hope. Her words remind us, as Walter Benjamin once observed, that it is only for the sake of those without hope that hope is given to us. Angela Y. Davis, University of California, Santa Cruz, March 2000. So now to attorney um, Lennox Hines. There's a second forward. That shows how much pull you have. That you have two forwards that are written by uh, prominent people, who are for our liberation. So that gives you a little bit of backstory, more surface level. But Lennox actually goes deeper into what happened. And then you'll get and then once we get into chapter one, you're going to get the, you know, the actual anecdotal experience from Assata Shakur herself. But first, the second forward, and this is from Lennox Hines. The publication of this extraordinary autobiography provides a rare opportunity to see behind the carefully orchestrated distortions of fact concerning the life and motivations of Assata Shakur. Writing simply and vividly about the racism that permeated her childhood and young womanhood, those ordinary experiences of Black people in the United States, and have driven millions to despair and many to rebellion, Assata leads us all to understand more about the society we live in. Clearly, it was the racism riddling every aspect of the early life of this sensitive, intelligently gifted, and life passionate child as she struggled to establish her own identity that led her to seek solutions to the catastrophic impact of racism and economic oppression on all people of color in the United States. It is racist America that it's racist America that provides the context for the making of this Black revolutionary. People struggling for self-determination are a phenomenon of the 20th century. These struggles are frequently understood and supported by people of goodwill in the United States. When the struggles take place in South Africa, El Salvador, the Philippines, or Palestinian refugee camps, Assata Shakur's own words, as she writes about her struggles for growth and meaning in the streets of New York and in the South as a child and as a woman, present as clear as a case for self-determination and development in the United States, as do the lives of her brothers and sisters throughout the world. For although her book is intensely personal, it is also absolutely political. She writes about her experiences not as a historical icon seeking to crystallize the official life, but as one who experiences searching for change can provide a key to her own life and to all those others who, as she so vividly puts it, quote, have been locked by the lawless, handcuffed by the haters, gagged by the greedy, and for whom a wall is just a wall and nothing more at all. It can be broken down. End quote. As a lawyer, teacher, and student of history, I know that while Assata Shauri may be unique in its energy, creativity, and passion for life and principle, it is typical of the ways the United States has responded historically to individuals that the government sees as political threats to domestic tranquility. Since Asada's touches only lightly on the events that led to her being targeted for police fire on the New Jersey Turnpike in 1973, and on the flimsy evidence on which she was finally convicted in 1977, I will attempt to sketch some of the details that contributed to the fearsome image generated by the state and perpetrated in the media. Let's go. I first met Assata Shakur in 1973 as she lay in the hospital close to death, handcuffed to her bed, while state, local, and federal police attempted to question her. As the national director of the National Conference of Black Lawyers, an organization that has been called on to defend political activists in the Black community since its founding in 1968, I was no stranger to the carefully orchestrated disinformation campaigns that federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies had engaged in against Black activists under the leadership of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Prior to the meeting of Assata, we had Representative Angela Davis had initiated inquiries into the 1969 police executions of Black Panther leaders Fred Hampton and Mark Clark, and in the 1971 police attack and indictments of the leadership of the Republic of New Africa, and had defended many other Black men and women who had been identified as targets of the FBI. The FBI's systematic surveillance and attacks on Black groups and individuals were orchestrated by its counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO, which was directed specifically against what the FBI termed Black nationalist hate groups. COINTELPRO's first targets were Martin Luther King and thousands of less prominent civil rights activists. Elsewhere, footnote reads, Lennox S. Hines, Illusions of Justice, Human Rights Violations in the United States, University of Iowa, 1978. Elsewhere, I have written extensively about COINTELPRO and the criminal disruption and destruction of Black leaders and groups that were the specific goals of this government program. The pertinent and unimpeachable documents collected in the Church Committee report of the Senate Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities was also reprinted in that book. In addition, the findings of the Domestic Intelligence Subcommittee, headed by Senator Walter Mondale, which were published by the U.S. Government Printing Office in 1976, provided incontrovertible documentation of this government-sponsored conspiracy against civil and human rights of all sorts of political activists and, most particularly, Black people. It is important to remember that Assata Shakur's decision to join the Black Panthers occurred soon after J. Edgar Hoover ordered the 41 FBI offices to intensify their efforts to, quote, expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, and otherwise neutralize, end quote, Black nationalist organizations and their leaders. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the SNCC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, the Nation of Islam, and above all, the Black Panthers were specifically targeted, as were, among many Blacks, Stokely Carmichael, aka Kwame Ture, Rap Brown, Elijah Muhammad, Fred Hampton, Mark Clark, and, as we shall see, Assata Shakur, also known as Joanne Chesimard. As is now clear, footnote says, the information presented here is based on federal and state court records and files, FBI memoranda, Secret Service files, police records and information in the media. As is now clear, a carefully orchestrated intelligence and counterintelligence campaign was conducted by the FBI in cooperation with state and local law enforcement agencies designed to criminalize, defame, harass, and intimidate Assata beginning at least in 1971. By the time Assata Shakur was shot and captured on the New Jersey Turnpike on May 2nd, 1973, she was wanted for a number of most serious crimes. Massive prejudicial publicity had been generated by the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the New York City Police Department to create an image of dangerousness to convict her in every aspect of the mass media before any trial. Orders have been issued to apprehend her dead or alive. She spells out the dread and terror when she writes, quote, "Everywhere I went, it seemed like I would turn around to find two detectives following behind me. I would look out my window, and there, in the middle of Harlem, in front of my house, there would be two white men sitting and reading the newspaper. I was scared to death to talk in my own house." End quote. Assata could no longer go home. She was on the FBI's most wanted list, accused of being armed, of being a bank robber, and subsequently of being a kidnapper and murderer. A photograph alleged to be Assata Shakur, taken at the scene of a bank robbery in August 1971, appeared in a full-page advertisement in the New York Daily News on July 10, 1972. It was a duplicate of a poster placed in every bank in the city and state of New York and post offices and subway stations. This advertisement announcing "Wanted for bank robbery, $10,000 reward" was printed above four photographs. One of them pictured a woman allegedly taken during 1971 bank robbery. Beneath the picture, in bold capital letters, was the name Joanne Deborah Chesimard. Chesimard. Sorry, I'm mispronouncing her last name, I think. During her trial for this bank robbery, which ended in acquittal, a jury found that it was not a picture of Assata Shakur, Joanne Chesimard. The photograph had been released by the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office to the New York Clearinghouse Association, a banks association, which placed the ad in posters. Even after Assata had been acquitted of this bank robbery in January of 1976, other advertisements offering the same reward for unapprehended bank robbers appeared in the Daily News in March 1976. This time, however, the photograph was recognizable mugshot of Assata with the words "apprehended" across her face. This poster appeared 2 months after her acquittal on August 1971 charge, 2 years after her acquittal on the September 1972 bank robbery charge, and while no bank robbery charges were outstanding against her. On February 12, 1973, 4 months before Assata was apprehended on the New Jersey Turnpike, New York Magazine published an article under the title "Target Blue," written by Robert Daly, an excerpt in his book of the same title. The cover of the magazine depicted a uniformed police officer. The subtitle was "The Story Behind the Police Assassinations." The article purported to provide intimate details about the Black Liberation Army, whose activities the article claimed were cop killing, bank robbing, and efforts to overthrow the U.S. government. Above a picture of Assata Shakur were the words "gunmen of the Black Liberation Army," and she was described by the former Deputy Police Commissioner Daley as the mother hen who kept them together, kept them moving, kept them shooting. End quote. Notwithstanding, this trial by media was the only indictment against Assata for killing police officer that was dismissed in October 1974 for lack of evidence. As the chart that follows this essay shows, on May 2nd, 1973, when the shooting on the New Jersey Turnpike occurred, Assata was wanted for all these crimes. The irony is that not one of the charges led to conviction. When she was apprehended, shot down on the New Jersey Turnpike, leading to her only conviction. She should have enjoyed the presumption of innocence that the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution is supposedly to grant to any of us when accused. On May 2nd, 1973, Assata, Sandiata Akoli, and Zaid Malik Shakur were traveling south on the New Jersey Turnpike in a white Pontiac. They were stopped by New Jersey State Trooper James Harper for reasons consistent with the FBI COINTELPRO guidelines, which directed that activists be arrested for minor traffic violations. The Pontiac allegedly had defective taillights. Harper's testimony, however, leaves open to the suggestion that the Pontiac was simply a target. Harper testified that when he first saw the Pontiac, he was 2 miles north of the Turnpike Administration Building, headquarters for the troopers. He followed the car for 2 miles until it was close to the administration building before he pulled it over because the light was better and there was more security. The Pontiac was traveling at normal speed in the center lane. Harper first passed it on the left lane, observed the driver, and made a mental note of his description. He then moved to the right lane and let the Pontiac pass him, at which time he made a mental note of the sex and race of the passengers. He then approached the Pontiac in the left lane, motioned the driver, Sandiata, to pull over, and then called the administration building for assistance. When Trooper Robert Pelinkar was directed to assist Harper, he commented over his radio, "Meet you at the pass, partner," and sped to the administration building at 120 miles per hour. Trooper Werner Forrester, who went to assist in this stop for which Harper testified, only a summons would have been issued. Over the years, I was to learn much about the selective, arbitrary, and ferocious ways the law and its processes would be applied against Assata Shakur from the moment I met her in the hospital in May 1973, where she clung to life. I can certainly not improve on Assata's account for her experiences before, during, and after her numerous trials, but I must point out that she understates the awfulness of the conditions in which she was incarcerated. I'm going to read that again. But I must point out that she understates the awfulness of the conditions in which she was incarcerated. As she mentions, even a hearing officer appointed by Middlesex County at the instruction of one of the federal judges before whom we argue our suits on the inhumanity of the conditions in which she was held, found the conditions shocking. In the history of New Jersey, no woman, pretrial detainee, or prisoner has ever been treated as she was, continuously confined in a men's prison under 24-hour surveillance of her most intimate functions, without intellectual sustenance, adequate medical attention and exercise, and without the company of other women for all the years she was in their custody. We filed one civil rights lawsuit after another complaining of the barbarous treatment selectively meted out to her, with limited success. As you read her story, imagine the effect these conditions must have on this proud and sensitive woman. Another bitter irony of her situation is that during the course of those years awaiting trial in New Jersey, many other charges that caused her to become a fugitive, leading to the shootout on the New Jersey Turnpike, were dropped for lack of evidence, were dismissed, or resulted in acquittal. And yet the physical conditions under which she was held worsened at best. Once again, the manipulation of facts by the media became a substitute for reality. None of the acquittals or dismissals were publicized. The massive security precautions for the pending New Jersey trial were the major stories on the front pages of the local newspapers day after day in the community from which the jury was selected. The sheer number of these baseless charges supports the contention held by many people that the extraordinary efforts of the state of New Jersey to get Assata Shakur convicted, notwithstanding the flimsy evidence, were undertaken to justify the fabricated image of the mad dog killer that had failed so humiliatingly to get her convicted in New York State and federal courts. Y'all following? Mm. Assata was convicted in New Jersey as an accomplice to the murder of state trooper Warner Forrester and of atrocious assault on James Harper with the intent to kill. New Jersey law, if a person's presence at the scene of a crime can be construed as aiding and abetting the crime, that person can be convicted of substantive crime itself. The state of New Jersey convicted Sundiata Acoli for the same murders after Assata was severed from the proceedings because of her pregnancy. The jury at Assata's trial for the same offenses were permitted to speculate that her mere presence at a scene of violence with weapons in the vehicle was sufficient to sustain a conviction, even though 3 neurologists tested at the trial that her median nerve had been severed by gunshot wounds, rendering her unable to pull a trigger, and that her clavicle had been shattered by a shot that could only have been made while she was seated in the car with her hands raised. Other experts testified that the neutron activation analysis administered by police right after the shootout showed no gun residue on her fingers, meaning she had not shot a weapon. She was also convicted of possession of weapons, none of which could be identified as having been handled by her, and of the attempted murder of State Trooper Harper, who had sustained a minor injury at the shootout. It has been and is my view that it was the racism in Middlesex County, fueled by biased, inflammatory publicity in the local press before and throughout the trial, fanned by the documented government's lawlessness, that made it possible for the white jury to convict Assata on the uncorroborated, contradictory, and generally incredible testimony of Trooper Harper, the only other witness to the events on the turnpike. Harper's testimony, as well as that of the other state's witnesses, was riddled with inconsistencies and discrepancies. On 3 separate official reports, including his grand jury testimony, Harper said that he saw Assata take a gun from her pocketbook while in the car and shot him. He admitted on cross-examination during both Sundiata's trial and Assata's trial that he never saw Assata with a gun and did not see her shoot him, that, in fact, he had lied. In addition, the judge refused to permit the defense to present any testimony on COINTELPRO. The truth is very simple. Assata Shakur did not receive a fair trial in Middlesex County, New Jersey. She had been convicted in the press and in the minds of the general public from the moment she was apprehended in New Jersey and over until the trial. The conviction in court was but a formality. Dear sister, thank you for sending us your vital voice and sharing your passion and commitment with us. Meanwhile, we in this society must remind ourselves again how we threaten our own interests and rights when we condone by our silence the government's use of surveillance, attacks on the legitimacy of political activists, and the use of criminal law to suppress and punish political dissent. In 1975, Attorney General Edward H. Levi, under the direction of President Carter and in consideration of the Church Committee findings, designed the first set of guidelines to keep the FBI within the Constitution in its investigations of individuals and groups allegedly dangerous to national security. The Levi guidelines, while not heartily applauded by civil libertarians, did attempt to restrain the unbridled use of the government's power to penetrate and disrupt organizations. By 1983, Attorney General William French Smith, under President Reagan, had rescinded the Levi Guidelines, and each year since, the protections of the Bill of Rights have been further eroded. For example, the FBI is now free to investigate persons or groups accused of advocating criminal activity. Clearly, the federal government is continuing its unrestrained abuse of power by which it attempted to destroy Assata Shakur and other Black individuals and groups by surveillance, rumor, innuendo, eavesdropping, arrest and prosecution, incarceration, and murder throughout the 60s and 70s. As long as members of Congress, still intimidated by ABSCAM, ABCSAM, are afraid to antagonize the FBI, and as long as FBI guidelines are drafted internally by the FBI, and as long as the Justice Department is subject to the political imperatives of the president, monitored only within the system, but without public accountability, we are all in danger of the kinds of repression and government secrecy that victimized Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Viola Liuzzo, Medgar Evers, Fred Hampton, Obadiah Imari, Assata Shakur, and many other brothers and sisters whose ideas and advocacy are threatening to the administration. We are all potential victims. I encourage you now to enter the heart and soul of Assata Shakur, who, despite all that has happened to her, preserves fresh idealism and confidence in the power of principled people to make change together for the common good of the peoples of the world. Lennox S. Hines, New York City. So that was just the forwards, full of just facts and information. And if you guys ever get a chance to get this book, this is great because this shows the chronological timeline of the trials. So this is pretty great. So this is a great book. This actually gives you a lot of detail. So she has an affirmation here that I'll just give it a quick read before I get into chapter 1. It says, I believe in living. I believe in the spectrum of beta days and gamma people. I believe in sunshine and windmills and waterfalls, tricycles and rocking chairs. And I believe that seeds grow into sprouts and sprouts grow into trees. I believe in the magic of the hands and in the wisdom of the eyes. I believe in rain and tears and in the blood of infinity. I believe in life, and I have seen the death parade march through the torso of the earth, sculpting mud bodies in its path. I have seen the destruction of the daylight and seen the bloodthirsty maggots prayed to and saluted. I have seen the kind become the blind and the blind become the blind in one easy lesson. I have walked on cut glass. I have eaten crow and blunder bread and breathed the stench of indifference. I have been locked by the lawless, handcuffed by the haters, gagged by the greedy. And if I know anything at all, it's that a wall is just a wall and nothing more at all. It can be broken down. I believe in living. I believe in birth. I believe in the sweat of love and the fire of truth. And I believe that a lost ship steered by tired, seasick sailors can still be guided home to port. So that was the affirmation as well. So now we're going to get into chapter 1. Now, at this point, it's 45:09. So at this point, I'm going to give a little bit of a warning before I get into chapter 1. This is going to be kind of tough to hear. Also, trigger warning, there is some torture. So if you are triggered, or is there any that really bothers you emotionally or mentally, you might want to skip this part, this chapter. But yeah, this gets deep. All right. I should have had a shot of some liquor before this. This is deep. Here we go. There were lights and sirens. Zaid was dead. My mind knew that Zaid was dead. The air was like cold glass. Huge bubbles rose and burst. Each one felt like an explosion in my chest. My mouth tasted like blood and dirt. The car spun around me, and then something like a sleep overtook me. In the background, I could hear what sounded like gunfire, but I was fading and dreaming. Suddenly, the door flew open, and I felt myself being dragged out onto the pavement, pushed and punched, a foot upside my head, a kick on the stomach. Police were everywhere. One had a gun to my head. "Which way did they go?" he kept shouting. "Bitch, you better open your goddamn mouth or I'll blow your goddamn head off." I nodded my head across the highway. I was sure that nobody had gone that way. A few of the cops were off and running. One pig said, "We ought to finish her off." But the others were all busy around the car, searching it. They were pulling and prodding. "You find the gun?" They kept asking each other. Later, one of them asked another, "Should we put her in the car?" "Nah, let's lay her in the gutter where she belongs. Just get her out of the way." I felt myself being dragged by the feet across the pavement. My chest was on fire. My blouse was purple with blood. I was convinced that my arm had been shot off and it was just hanging inside my shirt by a few strips of flesh. I could not feel it. Finally, the ambulance came and they moved me onto it. Being moved was agony, but the blankets were worth it. I was so cold. The medics examined me. I tried to talk, but only bubbles came out. I was foaming at the mouth. "Where's she hit?" They asked each other as if I wasn't there. They concluded their examination. I was relieved. "Let's move it," one of them said. "Okay, but wait a minute," the driver said the driver, and he got out. "Hit twice," I hear him say. "We gotta wait." The driver slammed the door. He said something else, but I didn't understand it. Time passed. I was floating off again. It felt so weird, like a dream, a nightmare. More time passed. It seemed like forever. I was in and out, in and out. A rough voice asked, "Is she dead yet?" I floated off again. I heard another voice. "Is she dead yet?" I wondered how long the ambulance had been sitting there. The attendants looked nervous. The bubbles in my chest felt like they were growing bigger. When they burst, my whole chest shattered. I faded again, and it was down south in the summertime. I thought about my grandmother. At least the ambulance was moving. If I live, I remember thinking, I'll only have one arm. The hospital is glaring white. Everybody I see is white. Everyone seems to be waiting. All at once, they were in motion. Blood pressure, pulse, needles, etc. Two detectives come in. I know they're detectives because they look like detectives. One of them has a face like a bulldog, jowls hanging down the sides. They supervise the nurse as she cuts off my clothes. After a while, one of them dabs my fingertips with what look like Q-tips. Later, I found out that this is the neutron activation test to determine whether or not I had fired a weapon. Another one of them tries to fingerprint me, but he has trouble because my hand is dead. "Give me the dead man's kit." He puts my fingers into spoon-looking things used to fingerprint dead people. They begin to ask me questions, but a bunch of doctors come in. One of them, who appears to be the head doctor, examines me. He pokes and prods, throwing me around like a rag doll. Then, like he's going to kill me, he jerks me around so that I'm on my stomach. The pain is like an electric shock. I moan. Don't cry now, girlie, he says. Why'd you shoot the trooper? Why'd you shoot the trooper? I wanted to kick him in his face. I know he would kill me if he had a chance. I can see the scalpel clipping. One of the other doctors says something about calling the operating room. Hell no! That's all I can think of. Hell no. After a while, they all leave. Then a black nurse comes into the room. I am glad as I could be to see her. She bends over me. What is your name? She asks. What is your name? I think about it and decide to say nothing. If I tell them my name, they will know who I am and they will want to kill me for sure. What is your name? She keeps asking, enunciating with each syllable in the way that people talk to someone who has trouble hearing or understanding. What is your name? What is your address? Where do you live? Her voice is getting louder. We need your signature, miss, she says, waving a piece of paper in front of me. We need your permission for treatment in case we have to operate. She repeats the same thing over and over. Who shall we contact in case of your emergency? I think that's kind of funny. What is your name? Where do you live? I close my eyes, wishing she would go away. She keeps right on talking. I drift off, thinking about my arm. It is still there. Nerve damage, paralyzed, I heard them say. It has never occurred to me. It isn't that bad, I remember thinking. I can live with that if I have to. More voices, other voices, grating my ears and my consciousness. She can talk, one is saying. The doctor says she can talk. The doctor says she can talk. Where are you going? What is your name? Where were you coming from? Who is that in the car with you? How many of you were there? I know she can hear me. I keep my eyes closed. One of them leans real close to me. I feel his breath on my cheek. I smell it. I know you can hear me, and I know you can talk. And if you don't hurry up and start talking, I'm going to bash your face in for you. My eyes fly open in spite of myself. Immediately, they're all in my face, throwing question after question after me. I say nothing. After a while, I close my eyes again. Oh, she doesn't feel good, one of her. Oh, she doesn't feel good, one of them says in a sweet, mocking voice. Where does it hurt? Here, here, here. With each here comes a crash. I look around wildly, but no one is there. More thumps and punches, but none of them hurts as bad as my chest is hurting. I try to scream, but I know immediately that that's a mistake. My chest erupts, and I think I'm going to die. They go on, questions and bangs. I think they will never stop. A woman's voice, telephone. Thank you, William says, giving me an ugly grin. They're gone. Another pig comes in, a black pig, in uniform. He comes closer, and I see that he's not a cop, but a hospital security guard. He stands not too far from where I'm laying, and I can see he's not at all hostile. His face breaks into a kind of reserved smile, and discreetly he clenches his fist and gives me the power sign. That man will never know how much better he made me feel at that moment. The detectives come back with a nurse. They began to move the stretcher. My mind races. Where are they taking me? The only place I can think of is the operating room. When we arrive at the x-ray room, I'm thankful because I have to move around. The x-rays are painful. The technician is cool. X-rays are over, and I am rolled down the hallway, determined to keep my eyes closed. All of a sudden, flashes of light. My eyes pop open. This time, they're taking my picture. The police photographer asks, don't you want to give us a smile? Come on, give us a smile. I close my eyes again. We are moving. The stretcher stops. One of the pigs tells the nurse he has a headache. She volunteers to get him something. The stretcher is moving again. Where in the hell are they taking me? Again, the lights is changing, and although my eyes are closed, I can feel the difference. It feels like I'm in the dark. I can't take it any longer, and I look. The room is dark, but there is some light. My eyes slowly adjust. There is something lying next to me. I can see an outline. Something in plastic. Something. My mind slowly realizes that it is a man in a plastic bag. And that man is Zaid. My body stiffens. My mind spins. One of the troopers says, "That's what's going to happen to you before the night is over if you don't tell us what we want to know." I say nothing, but inside I'm raging. Dogs, swine, filthy pigs, dirty, slimy scum, bastards, sons of bitches. I rage on and on. I wouldn't tell you the right time of day, I remember thinking. I wouldn't tell you that shit stinks. The night crawls along. Nurses, doctors, and troopers. I am still scared, but I am just as angry and evil as I am scared. The detectives are in and out, and when nobody is there except them, they get in their dings and bangs. But after a while, I don't think about them too much. I'm thinking about living, about surviving, thinking about what's going to happen next. They're going to do what they're going to do, and there isn't much I can do about it. I just have to be myself, stay as strong as I can, and do my best. That's all. There is nowhere to run, and I am in no shape to try. I realize how isolated and vulnerable I am. What if I really need what if I really do need an operation? I need help from the outside world. I have to try to get word out to someone. A black nurse has been back and forth asking me the same questions. Each time I have closed my eyes until she goes away. I decide to ask her to get me in touch with my people the next time she comes by. Maybe she will be cool. She is my best shot. The guard is long gone. I dozed off for a little while. When I wake up, the nurse and the priest are standing over me. The priest is mumbling and seems to be rubbing something on my forehead. At first, I don't understand what he's doing. Then it dawns on me. Last rites. Last rites are for the dying. Go away, I say out loud. I don't have the strength to say anything else. But I don't want anybody's last rites. I'm not going to die. And even if I do die, I'm not going to die nobody's hypocrite. The black nurse comes back and starts her questions again. Before she can start it good, I beckon her to come closer. There was no one else around. I ask her to get in contact with my lawyer, who is also my aunt. I give her my name and ask her to make the call herself. She had a hard time understanding me and keeps asking me to repeat my name. I can barely talk, and each time she asked me to repeat myself, I felt like screaming. Then it occurs to me that Assata is foreign to her ears. She has probably never heard the name before, so I give her my slave name. Then I give her the number, and she is off and running. 2 minutes later, the detectives are on me like white on rice. They threaten and plead, reason, and offer me the world. They hurl question after question at me, acting crazier than before. One plays the nice cop who is trying to save me from the bad cop. If only I will cooperate. I am tired, and their act is even tireder. I can see exhaustion in their faces. The whole night is coming down on me. Their voices begin to sound far away. I can't take it anymore. They can go to hell. I'm going to sleep. This time, I'm going out for real. When I wake up, the stretcher is moving. After a little while, we arrive at the intensive care part of the hospital. The place is packed with nurses. I am elated. All I want to do is sleep. Soon I'm drifting off again. I wake up and it's the next day. The doctors are making their rounds. One of them, an intern, I think, is very kind to me. They examine me and spend the rest of the morning doing blood tests, x rays, EKGs, etc., etc. Soon I learn that they're going to move me again. I also find out that I'm in the Middlesex County Hospital. I hear the nurses talking. They're glad I'm being moved because the police are driving them crazy. When they come to move me, it looks like a police parade. The rooms I am moved to are called the Johnson Suite. I can't believe it. I've never imagined that hospitals have rooms like this. There's a sitting room, a huge hospital equipped room where I am kept, a den, a kitchen, a full bathroom, and another little room whose purpose I will never learn. They transfer me to the bed and handcuff one of my legs to the side rail. I keep looking around. It is elegant and clearly for rich people. I am probably the first black person who has ever been in this room, and the only reason I'm here is for the security. They have sealed off the doors and no one can enter except through the sitting room next door where the 3 state troopers are stationed, 2 regulars and 1 sergeant. The police radio in the room cackles all day long. A carload of suspicious-looking coloreds in a white Ford coupe. A suspicious-looking Negro walking near the hospital in a blue jacket and sneakers. No suspicious-looking white people are reported. For listening to police talk next door and to the radio, I learned that the hospital is saturated with state troopers. They seem to be under the impression that somebody is going to try and break me out. I feel better. The Demerol has me flying a little and makes it easier for me to lie in the contorted position I'm forced into because of the cuff on my leg. Later that afternoon, it begins again. Detectives and more detectives. Questions and more questions. This time, the questions are different. Now they want to know about the Black Liberation Army. How big is it? What cities is it in? Who is in it? Etc., etc. But the main focus of their questions centers around that guy that got away. I'm delighted. I figured that Sundiata is somewhere safe by now, cooling out. They are more careful where and how they hit me now. I guess they don't want to leave any marks. One sticks his fingers in my eyes. I don't know what he has on his fingertips, but whatever it is, burns like hell. I think I'm going to be blind forever. He says he will keep doing it until I'm completely blind. I close my eyes and hold him as tight as I can. He strikes me a few more times. Some of the stuff gets into my eyes anyway. Burning tears pour down my face and my whole head is throbbing. I think he's going to keep on, but he begins to curse me, calling me kind of nigger bitches. All kind of nigger bitches. Finally, he and the others leave. On one of those first days, a white doctor comes in to examine me. He acts very nice, sweet as pie. He examines me slowly, the whole time making friendly conversation. I wonder what kind of a specialist he is since I haven't seen him before, and I know he isn't one of the regulars. He says he knows how terrible I must feel and makes a big deal of protesting that I'm chained to the bed. He keeps on talking, and after a while, he pulls his chair close to the bed. Then he starts to ask friendly little questions. The conversation goes something like this. Those guys on the turnpike are rough. They'll give you a ticket for anything. I take the turnpike every day. You live in Jersey? I live in Newark. You ever been there? You must be really lonely up here. I bet you really need someone to talk to. I went to medical school in New York. You're from there, aren't you? Aren't you? I get suspicious and say nothing to him. I tell him I want to go to sleep, and he leaves. I never saw him again, but to this day, I'm convinced he was some kind of police or FBI agent. On the third or fourth day, most of my troubles came to an end. Well, not really, but the punch bang, poke, and prod part of my troubles ended. A nurse with a German accent came to my aid. She was one of the morning nurses, very professional and exacting, to the point where she could be a pain in the neck, but she was a lifesaver. It was she who had first protested tightness of the handcuff on my leg. My leg had begun to swell, and she had insisted they loosen it and that the cuff be covered with gauze. Of course, as soon as she was gone, they tightened it again, but the gauze helped somewhat. I could tell by the little things that she said and did that she knew what was going on. One morning, she came in, and as usual, and after she finished her normal routine, she reached behind the bed, pulled at something, and then handed me an electric call button on a cord. Anytime you need me or anything from the nurses, just press this button, she said. Don't be afraid to use it, she added, giving me a knowing look. And I could have kissed her. Later, when she returned to the room after the troopers realized I had the call button, one came in behind her. Is there any way we can disconnect that thing? Yes. She might hurt someone with it or herself, or hurt herself. No, she said. There's no way to remove it. If you pull it out, it will just keep ringing the nurse's station. She's having difficulty breathing and she needs it. Right on, I thought. Das ist richtig. I think that's German. After that, whenever the police came in within 2 feet of my bed, I would push the button. Finally, they gave up the idea of beating on me and contented themselves with threats and other kinds of harassment. A favorite who was to stand at the door and point their guns at me. Each day was my last day on earth. Each night was my last night. After a while, I became accustomed, immune. Sometimes they would cock a gun, and I didn't know was empty, give a long, impassioned speech, and then pull the trigger. Other times, I was invited to a game of Russian roulette. They all expressed a bitter hatred for me. They were state troopers, and I was accused of killing one of them. Every day, there were 3 shifts of police. So when they changed shifts, the 2 troopers would salute the sergeant. Some saluted an army salute, but others saluted like the Nazis did in Germany. They held their hands in front of them and clicked their heels. I couldn't believe it. One day, one of them came in and gave me a speech about how he fought in World War II on the wrong side. He went on, and there was no question that he believed everything he said. He talked about how messed up the world is, how decent people couldn't walk the streets. He said that if Hitler had won, the world wouldn't be in the mess it is in today. That niggers like me, no good niggers, wouldn't be going around shooting New Jersey state troopers. He went on to say that the white race had invented everything because they were smart and worked hard, and that others wanted to riot and use terrorism to take everything the white race had worked so hard to get. I had a hard time keeping my mouth shut. I would have had a hard time keeping my mouth shut too. He talked about empires, the Roman, the Greek, the Spanish, the British. He told me white people created empires because they were more civilized than the rest of the world. White people created ballet and opera and symphonies. Quote, did you ever hear of a nigger writing a symphony? End quote, he asked. Every day he gave me a speech about Nazism. Sometimes other Nazis would join in. I asked him if there were a lot of Nazis in the state troopers, but he just laughed and kept on talking. Yeah, there probably was. When I was on the sorry, when I was in the Black Panther Party, we used to call the police fascist pigs. But I had called them fascists not because I believed they were Nazis, but because the way they acted in our communities. As many times as I have referred to police as fascists, these shocked me by the truth of my own rhetoric. I later learned that the state troopers in New Jersey were started by a German, that the uniforms were patterned after some type of German uniform, very similar to the uniforms in South African police war. that they are notorious for stopping Black, Hispanic, and long haired people on the turnpike and beating, harassing, and arresting them. The Nazis headed the harassment campaign against me. They spit in my food and turned down the thermostat in the room until it was freezing. For a while, their campaign centered on keeping me from sleeping. They stamped their feet on the floor, sang songs all night, played with their guns, shouted, etc. I told nurses about it, but it was no use. I could deal with whatever they were putting out, but how long would this go on? I had heard nothing from the outside world, and I didn't even know if my body knew where I was, or whether I was dead or alive. My chest was feeling better, but I could still hardly breathe. I thought I was past the point of needing an operation, but I wasn't sure if it was because of the painkillers they had given me or because I was really getting better. Every day I asked them to contact my lawyer. Every day they said they had tried, but there was no answer. I knew that it was a lie because Evelyn had an answering service. Every day I asked them to contact my family. The response to this was usually obscene. Oh, you got a family, do you? Is your mother a nigger whore like you? We don't allow no pickaninnies at this hospital. They went on and on about my family until they found something else to go on and on about. Whoever said that no news is good news had to be out of his mind. Well, there was news, but it wasn't good news. They told me they had arrested Sundiata. At first, I didn't believe them, but they were too glib and arrogant. I knew something had happened. We got your friend, they said, and he's singing like a bird. Yeah, he's singing like a bird, and he's giving you all the weight. It's a good thing for you he didn't know what color undies you had on, or he would have told us that. We know where you were coming from. We know where you were going. We know that you stopped at a Howard Johnson. He even told us that you ordered what you ordered and that you just love potato chips. What? I thought. How did they know that? That I remember Then I remembered that we had bought potato chips at a Howard Johnson on the turnpike. Maybe someone had seen me and remembered. Yes, yes, Clark Squire tells us that you took the trooper's gun and that you shot him in the head. Now, you wouldn't do a thing like that, would you? Well, Joanne, you're in a hell of a fix. If I were you, I wouldn't let him get away with it. It's a low down thing to do, giving all that weight to a woman. I'll make a deal with you. You tell us everything that happened, and I'll promise we'll go light on you. I just don't like to see you get a bad break. That's all. You're facing a lot of time in prison. The way things stand, if he testifies against you, you can get a life in prison or even the chair. All you have to do is tell us what happened, and we'll see to it that you do just a couple of years and go home. You're young. You don't want to rot away your whole life in prison, do you? Maybe you think you owe something to the cause. You think he's thinking about the cause now? No, he's singing his head off, trying to give you all the weight. They're all the same. They talk all this shit about black people, equal rights, civil rights. When it comes down to the wire, all they care about is their hide. He's thinking about his hide, and you better think about yours. You think the cause gives a damn about you? Your own people, your own people don't give a damn about you. To them, you're just a common criminal. Now, I'm giving you this one chance to save yourself and come clean. If you don't take it, you're a fool. They really did think black people were stupid. Their line had their line had to be the oldest in the book. He was sitting here like he just knew this corny little speech had done the trick. I said nothing. If you don't say anything to them, they have nothing to turn around and use against you. Divide and conquer has always been their motto. When they realized I wasn't going to talk, they began to leave. Then one came back. "Oh," he said, "I almost forgot to read you your rights." He pulled out his little card and read from it. "You have the right to remain silent. You have a right to, etc." I wouldn't want you to say that we didn't read you your rights. Thursday afternoon, they're letting me make a phone call. I don't believe it. I call my aunt. She's not in. The answering service answers. I don't know who else to call. The only lawyers whose names I know work on the Panthers 21 trial. I call them at random. No one is in, but secretaries promised to give them messages. I'm disappointed, but I feel a lot better. Things are looking up. It's Friday. From the activity in the room next door, I can tell something is up. Voices and whispers. They're all back and forth, in and out, arranging this, moving that. The police radio is jumping. What's happening? Whatever it is, it can't be too bad, I think. They are leaving me alone. In a little while, a policewoman comes in. She is in a brown uniform, and her insignia says, Sheriff's Department. She's black or Hispanic. I can't tell exactly, except that she isn't white. Then some more police come in, dressed in uniforms similar to her. Then more police. They are state troopers. One of them moves to the door and stands at attention. Then some men in suits come in. Then a man comes in with a stenographic machine. The Honorable Joseph F. Bradshaw, State of New Jersey, County of Middlesex, all rise. Then this judge walks in with a black robe on. One of the men in the suit reads the charges against me. We are here today to serve complaints upon you for the matters arising out of the shooting of May 2nd of 1973. We will read you the complaints, leave copies with you of the charges that will be pending against you. The judge then will advise you on the arraignment of such rights you may have. You are charged under complaint number 11977 by Detective Toronto, the New Jersey State Police, who says on the 2nd of May 1973, with the confines of the township of East Brunswick, County of Middlesex, you unlawfully and illegally resisted lawful arrest made by New Jersey State Trooper James Harper by discharging a dangerous pistol and wounding the said James Harper and fleeing the scene of the incident, all in violation of New Jersey Statute 2A 85-1. You are also charged under complaint number S119979 by Detective Sergeant Toronto of the New Jersey State Police, who says that on the 2nd of May, 1973, when in the township of East Brunswick, County of Middlesex, that you did commit an atrocious assault and battery upon New Jersey State Trooper James Harper by shooting, wounding, and maiming the said James Harper with a handgun, and there discharged by the defendant all violation of New Jersey Statute 2A 90-1. In the second court, you are charged by said officer who said to the defendant Joanne Deborah Cherismart did the aforementioned date and place unlawfully and illegally assault the said James Harper with an intent to kill, murder, and slay him by use of a handgun, and there held by the defendant all violation of New Jersey Statute 2A 90-2. In further charges, the third court that the aforementioned defendant did at the above mentioned time and place commit an unlawful and illegal assault and battery on the law enforcement officer, to wit, one James Harper, a duly sworn trooper of the New Jersey State Police, by discharging a firearm and wounding the said James Harper, all violations of New Jersey Statute 2A 90-4. And Statute 119980, you are charged with illegally and unlawfully committing the crime of murder by willfully and with malice, aforethought shooting, killing, and slaying New Jersey State Trooper Warner Forrester, all in violation of New Jersey Statute 2A 113-1 and New Jersey Statute 2A 85-41. You are further being charged under Statute 119981 with one count wherein Detective Sergeant Toronto charges you on the second day of May 1973 within the township of East Broomwick, New Jersey, Middlesex, that you did unlawfully, illegally, and with malice aforethought cause or effect the murder of James Costin, aka Zayed Shakur, with the resisting or avoiding of lawful arrest, then and there being affected by New Jersey State Trooper James Harper, all in violation of New Jersey Statute 2A113-2. You are charged with Statute 11 charged with S 11982 by State Police Sergeant Louis Toronto on the state, I'm sorry, down on second day of May 1973 in the township of East Brunswick, County of Middlesex. You are unlawfully and illegally possess your own on your person, under your custody and control, an illegal weapon, to wit, one Browning 9mm automatic pistol, one Browning automatic 380 caliber, 138 caliber Llama automatic pistol, serial number 24831, all without having obtained any necessary permit for the carrying of same in violation of New Jersey Statute 2A151-41A. It's a lot of legalese. You are further charged in complaint S119983, wherein Detective Sergeant Toronto says on the second day of May in 1973, in the township of East Brunswick, County of Middlesex, you did unlawfully and illegally and forcibly take from the person of New Jersey State Trooper Warner Forrester a 38 caliber revolver by violence, to wit, by shooting, slaying, and killing the same Warner Forrester, all in violation of New Jersey Statute 2A141-1. The second count of that complaint charges you with committing an act while being armed in violation of New Jersey Statute 2A151-1. -5. You are being charged by the State Trooper Detective Sergeant Toronto complaint S119984, who says on the second day of May 1973 in the township of East Brunswick, County of Middlesex, that you did illegally, unlawfully conspire with James Costin, aka Zayed Shakur, and one John Doe to commit a crime of murder of said Trooper Warner Forrester, and in the effectuation of said conspiracy did execute the following overt acts. 1. That the said defendant Joanne Deborah Cherismart did have in her possession a pistol with which to effectuate the ends of the conspiracy on the above mentioned time and at the above mentioned place. 2. The above named defendant Joanne Deborah Chesimard, in concert with and by common scheme and plan, did assault Trooper James Harper and otherwise discharge her weapon at the said Trooper James Harper with the intent to affect the ends of the conspiracy by otherwise wounding, maiming, or killing him, all in violation of New Jersey Statute 2A98-1 and New Jersey Statute 2A1113-1. I think he will never stop. Half of these charges don't even understand. I interrupt proceedings. I don't have a lawyer here, I protest. I would like to have a lawyer present. They ignore me and keep on reading. How do you plead? They ask me. I would like to have a lawyer present. Don't I have a right to a lawyer? That will not be necessary, the judge says coldly. Enter a plea of not guilty for the defendant. As just as quickly as they entered, the procession departs. Later, the same policewoman comes back. She stands rigidly against a wall, her face in a mask. Oh no, I think. Court again? What are they going to do? Railroad me here and now? I imagine myself being tried right here in the bed with no lawyer. The door opens. It's Evelyn, my lawyer and aunt. She is the most beautiful sight in the world. She embraces me and sits down next to me. As usual, she is business first. I only have 5 minutes, she tells me. They told me that I couldn't see you. I had to go to court to get a court order to see you. The judge would only give us 5 minutes apiece. Your mother and sister are outside, so talk fast. We look up. The police are practically standing in our mouths. I would like to talk to my client in private, Evelyn says. Would you please move back? This is an outrage. This is an attorney client visit, and we have a constitutional right to privacy. The police move back 1 inch. I tell Evelyn about the kangaroo court in the morning. My mouth moves so fast, it's like one of those old style movies. But I talkie. I can see from the expression on her face that I must look horrible. How are they treating you? She asks. I don't have time to tell her the whole story, but I have to let her know what's going on. I don't know what they'll do next. I have to try to get someone to pressure on them to stop. I tell her some of it, but I just can't tell her the worst things. Her face looks so pitiful, and every time I tell her something else, her hands shake. Try to do what you can, I say. Time's up. Time's up, miss. Everyone makes her Evelyn makes her futile protest. I need to talk to my client. There's just not enough time. Sorry, miss. Time's up. They move her like they are going to beat her up. Then she is gone. I brace myself for my mother and my sister. It has been such a long time since I've seen them. I don't know what to expect. My mother comes in. She looks worried, but strong. She kisses me. I'm proud of you, she says. The words spin around me, weaving a warm blanket of love. I am so happy I can hardly contain myself. My mother is proud of me. She loves me, and she is proud of me. Too soon, the time of my mother is up. My sister comes in. She has her hair wrapped in a turban, and she looks so pale. As soon as she sees me, she breaks out crying. Tears stream down her already puffy face. I can tell she's been crying a lot. I love you, she says simply. We don't have a lot of talking, but I feel so very close to her during these few minutes. Time's up again, and then she's gone. I lie there full of emotion. All of this is so hard on my family. They look vulnerable and shaken. This may be harder on them than it is on me. I wish there was something I can do to make them happy. Two black nurses were very kind to me. When they were on duty, they would go out of their way to make sure I was all right. They made frequent trips to my room, for which I was especially grateful during those first days. If you need anything, just ring, they said knowingly. One night, one of the nurses came in and gave me 3 books. I hadn't even thought about reading. The books were a godsend. They had been carefully selected. One was a book of black poetry. One was a book called Black Women in White America. And the third was a novel, Siddhartha, by, by Herman Hesse. Whenever I tried, sorry, Whenever I tired of the verbal abuse of my captors, I would drown them out by reading the poetry out loud. Invictus and If We Must Die were poems I usually read. I read them over and over until I was sure the guards had heard every word. The poems were my message to them. When I read the book about black women, I felt the spirit of those sisters feeding me, making me stronger. Black women have been struggling and helping each other survive the blows of life since the beginning of time. And when I read Siddhartha, a peace came over me. I felt unity with all things living. The world, in spite of opposition, I'm sorry, the world, in spite of oppression, is a beautiful place. I would say Om softly to myself, letting my lips vibrate. I felt the birds, the sun, and the trees. I was in a communion with all the forces of the earth that truly love people, in communion with all the revolutionary forces on the earth. I was definitely getting better. They were even unchaining me so that I could hobble to the bathroom every now and then with the help of the nurse. I was still weak, and when I returned from the bathroom, I would flop on the bed as if I had just accomplished a great physical feat. But at least now I knew what was wrong with me. During those first days, I could barely ask, and when I did, they acted as if my condition were so top secret information I was not privy to. I had 3 bullet holes. There was a bullet in my chest, and it's still there. An injured lung with fluid in it, a broken clavicle, and a paralyzed arm with undetermined damage to the nerves. I kept asking if I would be able to use my hand again. 1 or 2 doctors flatly said no. The others said maybe yes, maybe no. Anyway, I was going to live. Story, you died. I cried, and I kept going, getting up, a little slower and a lot more deadly. Wow. So that was the forward as well as chapter 1 of Assata, an autobiography. Man, I tell you. So she went through it, man. Wow. What do you guys think about that, by the way? Like, it just goes to show that the state is capable of some terrible things. And this makes me think about people like Mumia Abu Jamal, people like even Julian Assange. She's in a prison being held in Belmarsh in the UK, and you know that they're tortured and they're subject to heinous acts by people who claim to be people who want to serve and protect us, but they don't serve and protect us. I mean, look what we're doing to Assata. You know, look what they did to George Jackson. So I think I'm glad I picked up this book. Because you know they literally, after she was shot and she was handcuffed to the bed, they were beating on her. That's torture. And if I remember, according to the Geneva Conventions, that's a crime against humanity, and that's what they were doing to her. When you go up against imperialism and capitalism, and you go up against it in a strong way, these are the tactics that they use to break you. This is why collective action is necessary. I am grateful that she is still alive, and I hope she's thriving in Cuba right now. And thank goodness they never extradited her. I hope, I don't know if this will ever happen, but I hope that one day she's honored for what she did instead of being vilified. If I had it my way, she would get a medal. She would get honored. A statue would be erected to people like her for what she did. What are your thoughts, about this, you know, and just let me know, about this. Oh, by the way, chapter 2 is coming next. So this is deep, but I want to thank you all for watching. And if you guys have not yet, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. That little red box should be down here if you're watching on YouTube. And I'll be doing the next chapter for this. And more subscribers, it lets me know that I'm doing the right thing. And I hope that you guys that reflects in the amount of people that are trusting of me doing the reading for this, as well as talking more about you know the world and how we can change it in a positive way, and the things that are wrong with the world, and telling the truth. And I appreciate that. Thank you to everybody who is a patron on Patreon and Coffee, as well as people who are sending me mutual aid via other platforms. I appreciate it so much. It means a lot, and it definitely helps, especially in the middle of a hurricane, aka tropical storm. Yeah, and thankfully, power came back on, a few hours ago, so we don't have to worry about that. But I look forward to continuing the reading. And then on top of it, I'll also be continuing the reading of Dirty Truths by Michael Parenti. Uh, this will be very interesting. And yeah, so I just want to thank you all for tuning in. I want you to, as I always say, water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found it, and solidarity with the revolutionaries. Power to the people.